Marco Vitali's phone buzzed against the marble counter of a house that had never once felt like a home, and the message on the screen made him go still in the way that made grown men in his organization leave rooms without being asked. "I miss you. Come home soon." He did not recognize the number. He had not been anyone's home in 11 years. But the words sat there glowing in the dark kitchen, uninvited, unexplained, and something in his chest reacted before his mind caught up to why. He read it 3 times. Then he stood, buttoned his jacket, and told Dominic to bring the car around. Bailey Foster had no idea any of this was happening. She was 40 minutes into a 12-hour shift at St. Adelaide's Medical Center, her light blue scrubs already creased at the knees from crouching beside a gurney, her phone forgotten in the side pocket where it had auto-corrected a text meant for her sister into a message sent to a stranger 3 digits off from the right number. She had not even noticed the notification that it delivered. She was busy. A man in Bay 4 was complaining that his chest hurt in a way that made her stomach tighten with the particular alertness that came from 4 years of trusting her own instincts over a patient's calm face. She did not know that 40 minutes away, in a house behind iron gates in a part of the city polite people did not drive through after dark, a man who buried enemies for a living had just read 4 words that cracked something open he had spent over a decade keeping welded shut. She would find out soon enough. The kind of soon that arrives with headlights and men who do not knock. The chest pain in Bay 4 turned out to be reflux, easily managed, and Bailey moved on to the next name on the board with the tired efficiency of someone who had learned not to celebrate small mercies too loudly, because the next 15 minutes might ask something bigger of her. That was the rhythm of the emergency department. Calm, then chaos, then calm again, stacked so close together most people outside the walls could not imagine living inside it. Bailey had built a life inside it anyway. She liked the certainty of it, strange as that sounded. A body told the truth eventually. People lied about their pain levels, their drinking, their falls down the stairs that were actually something else entirely, but the body underneath all of it did not know how to lie for long. She trusted what she could measure: heart rate, oxygen saturation, the particular color a lip turned right before things got serious. She checked her phone at 9:47 during a lull, thumb swiping without much thought, and saw the small gray bubble of a sent message she did not remember composing to a name she did not recognize. Her stomach dropped in the mild, embarrassed way it does when you realize autocorrect has humiliated you in front of the wrong audience. She squinted at the screen. "Miss you. Come home soon." Sent to a contact saved somehow as nothing at all, just a number. She typed quickly, "Sorry, wrong number, ignore that," and hit send before a supervisor called her name from across the unit, and the moment slid out of her mind the way small mistakes do when a hospital does not give you the luxury of dwelling. Marco did not answer the correction. He read it and set the phone face down on the seat beside him, and told the driver the name of the hospital his people had already traced the number to within 11 minutes. Because when you run the kind of organization Marco Vitali ran, minutes were currency, and information was cheaper than most people believed. He was not a man who chased ghosts. He told himself that twice on the drive, the way a person repeats a fact they are actively disproving through their own behavior. But the words on that screen had arrived exactly like the ones his wife used to send him, home late from meetings that were never really meetings, before the accident that had nothing to do with an accident, and everything to do with a rival family's message delivered in the worst possible language. Come home soon. 4 words. His wife's voice, dead 9 years, somehow finding a phone at 9:41 on a Tuesday night. He knew it was impossible. He was going anyway. Bailey's shift moved forward the way it always did, one small emergency after another, until close to 11, when the automatic doors of the ambulance bay hissed open onto something the department was not built to metabolize. 4 men in dark coats entered like weather, not shouting, not rushing, which was somehow more unsettling than either would have been. They walked with the calm of men who had never once needed to run from a consequence. At the center of them, a man in a charcoal suit that fit him the way tailored things fit people who had never worn anything else. Dark hair combed back, a face built from angles that made the overhead fluorescent lighting look intentional instead of ugly. The charge nurse, a woman named Renata who had survived 3 decades of St. Adeline's chaos with her spine fully intact, stepped in front of them with her clipboard raised like a shield built from paperwork. "Sir, this is a restricted area. You'll need to check in at registration." "I'm looking for a nurse," Marco said, and his voice was quiet in a way that carried anyway. "Light blue scrubs. She sent a text tonight from this hospital's network at 9:41. "We have 40 nurses in light blue scrubs," Renata said, unmoved, because she had faced down drunks and grieving fathers, and once a man who tried to bring a rooster into triage, and this was simply another Tuesday to her nervous system, even though her pulse had quietly picked up the moment she registered the stillness radiating off the men behind him. Bailey heard the commotion from the med room, the particular hush a floor develops when something is wrong that is not medical, and stepped out into the hallway with a tray of supplies still in her hands. Blue scrubs, dark hair pulled back, tired eyes that had not yet clocked that she was the reason 4 men in expensive coats were standing in her department at 11 at night. Marco saw her before she saw him, and something in his chest performed the same lurch it had at the kitchen counter, foolish and immediate and entirely unwelcome. She was not his wife. Of course she was not his wife. His wife had been gone 9 years, and dead people do not send text messages, no matter how badly a man's mind wants them to. But there was something in the tired set of her shoulders, in the way she carried the tray like it weighed nothing, though her whole body said otherwise, that made him understand exactly why his hands had gripped the car door on the way over. "You," he said, and it was not a question. Bailey looked between the 4 men and the one who had spoken, and every instinct she had ever developed working nights in an ER told her that whatever this was, it required calm and information before anything else. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "You sent a message, tonight. Miss you. Come home soon." He said each word like he was placing evidence on a table between them. "To this number." He held up his phone, screen lit, the words she had sent to her sister's near identical number glowing back at her, and Bailey's stomach performed the particular drop of understanding. Your smallest mistake has apparently detonated somewhere much larger than you intended. "That was a wrong number," she said. "I meant to text my sister. I'm so sorry if that caused some kind of confusion, but I don't know you, and you can't be back here. This is a patient care area." 15 minutes, Marco said, and something in the request landed less like a demand than like a man asking for permission he was fully prepared to be denied. 15 minutes of your time. I'll wait wherever is appropriate. I understand this is your work." Renata's eyebrows had climbed nearly into her hairline at the sight of a man who so clearly did not ask permission for anything, asking permission. Bailey glanced at the clock, at the board of patients still waiting, and made a decision that would have looked reckless to anyone who had not spent 4 years learning to read a room in seconds. "I get a break in 20 minutes, she said. "There's a coffee shop across the street. If you're still here, we can talk. If not, I understand." It was not agreement so much as a test, and Marco recognized it as one. The particular kind of test a person who has learned not to trust easily constructs without even meaning to. He nodded once and withdrew his men from the department with a gesture so slight most people would have missed it, and Bailey went back to her patients with her pulse hammering in a way that had nothing to do with anyone's oxygen saturation. She told herself she would not go. She told Renata she was not going. She went anyway, 23 minutes later, because some curiosities refused to be reasoned with, and because the man had waited in a coffee shop across from a hospital instead of dragging her anywhere, and something about that restraint had lodged itself in her mind and would not leave. He stood when she entered, which nobody had done for her in longer than she wanted to admit, and pulled out the chair across from his own without making a show of the gesture. Up close, in ordinary light instead of the fluorescent hum of the ER, she could see the tiredness under his eyes, the kind that did not come from a single bad night, but from years of them stacked on top of each other like sediment. Marco Vitali, he said, and offered nothing else, no explanation of what that name meant to the people who dealt with him professionally, though she would learn soon enough. Bailey Foster. I really did mean to text my sister. Bailey with a Y for me, Riley with an R for her. My phone loves to be unhelpful. I know, he said. I checked. The bluntness of it should have alarmed her more than it did. Instead, something in her, the same something that trusted a patient's pulse over their words, registered that he was not lying and was not trying to frighten her either. He was simply a man who had checked, the way some men checked, and was now sitting across a small table telling her the truth about it, because he did not see the point in doing otherwise. My wife used to text me those exact words, Marco said, and the sentence cost him something visible, a tightening around his mouth that told Bailey he was not a man who discussed this often, or ever. She's been gone 9 years. When I saw your message tonight, I told myself it was coincidence. I came here anyway. Bailey sat with that for a moment, turning it over the way she turned over a confusing vital sign, looking for the explanation underneath the surface reading. I'm sorry for your loss. That's a strange thing for you to carry into a hospital at 11 at night over a wrong number, but I understand it a little better now. You're not frightened of me, he observed, and it did not sound like relief exactly, more like data being logged. Should I be? Most people are. Most people don't spend their nights holding pressure on wounds while asking someone how their day is going so they don't panic, Bailey said. I don't scare easy anymore. Occupational hazard. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not quite a smile, nowhere near it, but a recalibration. The look of a man revising an estimate. He asked about her work instead of continuing to explain himself, and she found herself answering honestly about the 12-hour shifts and the ache in her feet by hour 8 and the particular exhaustion of holding calm for other people all day when nobody was holding it for her. He listened in a way most people did not, without waiting for his turn to speak, and when her break timer buzzed on her watch, he stood again before she did. Thank you for humoring a stranger's grief, he said. Thank you for not being the kind of stranger I was worried you'd be, she answered, and left him standing on the sidewalk outside the coffee shop, watching her cross back to the hospital with an expression his men had not seen on him in 9 years, and would spend the following weeks quietly discussing among themselves. He did not contact her again for 4 days, which felt to her like restraint, and felt to him like the longest 4 days of a decade. On the 5th night, flowers arrived at the nurse's station, no card, and Renata took one look at the arrangement's obvious expense and said, Bailey, honey, whoever that is, you tell me everything, in the tone of a woman who had earned the right to be nosy through decades of patching up other people's chaos. The flowers kept coming, never with a note, until Bailey finally texted the number back herself, a full sentence this time, on purpose. You don't have to keep sending these. If you want to talk to me, just talk to me. He called instead of texting, his voice low over the line. I didn't want to overstep. Buying out half a florist's inventory anonymously is a specific kind of overstepping, Marco. Duly noted, he said, and there was something almost like humor in it, dry and unpracticed. Dinner, not the coffee shop, somewhere with real chairs. She should have said no. She thought about all the reasons to say no during the entire walk to her car after her shift ended. The strangeness of him, the men in coats, the wife who had died under circumstances he had described only as gone, not died, not passed, gone. The way people describe things they cannot bring themselves to name directly. But she thought too about the way he had waited across the street instead of forcing his way further into her department, about the way he had asked instead of assumed, and she said yes before she had fully finished arguing herself out of it. Dinner led to a second dinner, and by the third, Bailey had learned enough fragments to assemble a picture she did not like the shape of. Marco did not explain his business directly, but the way certain rooms went quiet when he entered them, the way waiters at even the finest restaurants seemed to know him without introduction, the careful blankness that came over his face whenever she asked what exactly he did for work, all of it painted an outline she was not naive enough to ignore. You're not going to ask me directly, Marco said one evening, watching her over a glass of wine she had barely touched. Most people either run or pretend they already know everything from movies. You're doing neither. I figure you'll tell me when you're ready, or I'll learn on my own, and either way, asking directly feels like handing you a script to lie inside of if that's what you wanted to do, Bailey said. I read people for a living too, Marco, just different stakes than yours. My family runs certain territories in this city, he said finally, plainly, no embellishment, no softening. Not legally. I inherited responsibility for things I did not build and cannot easily walk away from. People have died because of decisions connected to my name, some of them people I loved. Bailey set her glass down carefully, the way she set down anything when she needed a steady surface to think against. Your wife. An enemy wanted to send a message. She was the message. His jaw worked once, tightly, and Bailey understood without being told that this was a door he had never opened this wide for anyone since. I have spent 9 years making sure nothing like that happens again, to anyone I care about. That's why you keep everyone at arm's length, Bailey said. Not a question, an observation, the same way she might note a symptom pattern. That was the plan. Was? He did not answer that directly, but the look he gave her answered it anyway, and Bailey felt the floor of her careful, ordinary life tilt slightly under a truth she was not ready to name aloud either. The danger arrived 3 weeks later, on an ordinary Thursday, in the parking garage behind St. Adeline's, where Bailey had parked for 2 years without a single incident worth mentioning. She was fumbling for her keys when a car she did not recognize rolled to a stop too close, and 2 men got out with the kind of unhurried menace that told her immediately this had nothing to do with hospital business. Tell Vitali we know about the nurse, one of them said, close enough that Bailey could smell cigarettes and something colder underneath. Tell him this was a courtesy. Next time won't be. They left before she could fully process what had happened, tires screeching against the concrete ramp, and Bailey stood frozen for exactly 4 seconds before her training took over and she did the only thing that made sense to a woman who spent her professional life making decisions under pressure. She called Marco, not the police, because some instinct told her the police would only complicate a threat that clearly originated from a world they could not touch. He arrived in 11 minutes, faster than seemed physically possible, and the fury on his face when she described the men was quieter and far more frightening than shouting would have been. This is what I do to people who get close to me, he said, low, almost to himself. I should have stayed away from you. You don't get to make that decision alone, Bailey said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her own voice. I'm not a child, Marco, and I'm not made of glass. I've made it through worse than a parking garage threat. Tell me what's actually happening so I can decide for myself whether I want to be here." He told her, finally, everything. A rival family, the Berettis, circling territory his organization had held for 2 generations, using the discovery of her as leverage, a way to remind him that anyone he valued was reachable. It was ugly, and it was real, and it did not romanticize itself in the telling, and Bailey listened without flinching, cataloging the information the way she cataloged a difficult diagnosis, looking for the places she could actually act rather than simply absorb fear. "I have an idea," she said finally, and Marco looked at her like she had spoken in a language he did not expect a civilian to know. Her idea was simple and entirely her own. Working the ER for years had taught her the movements of the hospital better than almost anyone. The cameras, the shift patterns, the entrances nobody thought to watch. If the Berettis wanted to send a message through her, she would make sure any attempt to reach her again happened somewhere she controlled completely, somewhere with witnesses, cameras, and an environment built for crisis management. She proposed staying visible, predictable, and surrounded, drawing any further move into a space where Marco's men could respond without risking innocent bystanders, rather than hiding and waiting to be found somewhere less safe. "You want to use yourself as bait?" Marco said, flat, furious at the idea before she finished explaining it. "I want to control the terrain," Bailey corrected. "There's a difference. I've spent years managing chaos on my own turf. Let me manage this on mine." He argued. She held her ground with the same calm patience she used on frightened patients and their families, laying out the logic piece by piece, until even his protective fury had nowhere left to stand against it. In the end, he agreed, on the condition that his men would be closer than she would probably be comfortable knowing, and Bailey accepted that condition because she understood the difference between stubbornness and stupidity. The confrontation, when it came, happened not in shadow, but in the fluorescent brightness of the hospital's public lobby 3 nights later, when a man Bailey did not recognize approached the registration desk claiming a medical emergency that dissolved the moment security cameras caught him lingering too long near the staff entrance instead of any exam room. Bailey, stationed exactly where she had planned to be, recognized the pattern immediately, the deliberate wrong turn, the studied casualness, and signaled security with a code phrase she and Renata had rehearsed for exactly this possibility. What followed was fast and almost anticlimactic in its efficiency. Marco's men, positioned unobtrusively in the parking structure and near the loading dock exactly as promised, intercepted the man before he ever reached a hallway with fewer witnesses, and the confrontation ended not in violence, but in a clear, unmistakable message delivered back to the Beretti family through channels Bailey did not fully understand and did not ask to. No one was hurt, no blood was spilled in her hospital, but the message landed with total clarity that the nurse in light blue scrubs was not an unguarded weakness to be exploited, and that any further attempt would be met with consequences the Berettis were not prepared to absorb. Marco found her afterward in the break room, hands still faintly trembling with adrenaline she refused to call fear, and he studied her for a long moment before speaking. "You put yourself directly in the path of danger to protect what I built," he said. "Most people run from what I am. You walked toward it and used it." "I didn't do it for what you built," Bailey said. "I did it because you're the first person in a long time who asked instead of assumed, and because I'm done being someone things happen to instead of someone who decides things. If that scares you, I understand. It probably should." "It doesn't scare me," Marco said, and something in his voice broke open in a way she had not heard from him before, unguarded, entirely unpracticed. "It terrifies me how much I need you to be safe, and how much less afraid I am of everything else now that you've shown me you can hold your own inside it." "That's not nothing," Bailey said quietly. No, he agreed. It isn't. He did not kiss her that night, not yet, because some things are earned slowly, and both of them understood, without discussing it, that the moment needed more weight than a hospital break room could hold. Instead, he stayed until her shift ended, sitting in a hard plastic chair meant for anxious families, present in a way none of his money or power had ever bought him with anyone else. And Bailey found that presence said more than any declaration could have. The real ending came 2 weeks later at a small Italian restaurant far from either of their usual haunts, where Marco requested a table in the back with a view of the door, old habits refusing to die even as the danger receded. He was quiet through most of the meal, working towards something, and Bailey let him take his time, the way she let a nervous patient work up to admitting the real reason they had come in. I sent that text to you 9 years too late for my wife, and 40 minutes too early for anything I understood about my own life, Marco said finally. I have spent 9 years building walls so thick nothing could get through them, because the last time something did, I lost the only person who ever made those walls feel worth having. I do not know how to explain what it means that a wrong number undid all of it in a single message. You don't have to explain it, Bailey said. I've spent 4 years learning to sit with people in the hardest moments of their lives without needing everything to be tidy or explainable. This doesn't need to be tidy, Marco. It just needs to be true. It's true, he said, and reached across the table to take her hand, the first time he had done so without the excuse of danger or urgency, simply because he wanted to. I want you to stay, not because I'm afraid of losing you the way I lost her, because I've finally found something worth being afraid of losing at all, and I would rather have that fear than the empty certainty I lived in before you sent me the wrong text at the right time. Bailey looked at him across the small table, at the man who had walked into her hospital with 4 hardened men at his back and left with nothing but a request. And she made her choice with the same clear-eyed steadiness she brought to every decision that mattered. I'm staying, she said, not because you asked, because I want to. There's a difference, and I think you, of all people, understand that better than anyone. He smiled then, small and real, the kind that did not perform for anyone watching. And outside the restaurant window the city moved on, entirely unaware that somewhere inside it, a chubby nurse in light blue scrubs and a mafia boss who had spent 9 years alone had both decided, independently and then together, that some accidents were simply life correcting a mistake nobody knew it had been waiting to fix. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more dark romance stories just like this one, and drop a comment letting us know what you thought of Bailey and Marco's story. There are more stories waiting for you, so stay close and we will see you in the next one.